Black Beauty. Have you ever wondered what life looks like through the eyes of an animal? My name is Black Beauty. I was born on a peaceful farm in England. My first memories are filled with green fields, fresh air, and my loving mother. She was a wise and gentle horse who always taught me to be calm and obedient. She often reminded me that a good horse should always do his best, no matter who his owner was. I did not fully understand her words when I was young, but I would remember them for the rest of my life. As a young colt, I spent my days running across the fields with other horses. We played together under the warm sunshine and rested beneath tall trees. Life was peaceful, and every day felt full of happiness. The humans on the farm treated us kindly. They never shouted at us without reason, and they always made sure we had enough food and clean water. When I grew older, it was time for me to begin my training. At first, I was nervous. A saddle felt strange on my back, and the bridle seemed uncomfortable in my mouth. But my trainer was patient. He never beat me or frightened me. Instead, he spoke softly and rewarded me whenever I learned something new. Soon I understood how to carry a rider, pull a carriage, and follow commands. I wanted to please the people who cared for me. Not long afterward, I was sold to a large country house called Birtwick Park. At first, I felt sad to leave the farm where I had been born. I looked back at my mother one last time before the wagon carried me away. I did not know then that this would be the beginning of a long journey through many different lives. When I arrived at Birtwick Park, I met my new master and mistress. They were kind people who believed that animals should be treated with respect. Their servants followed the same rule. I soon realized that this was a happy home. In the stable, I became friends with two other horses. One was Merrylegs, a small pony who loved children. He was cheerful and always seemed to enjoy making people smile. The other was Ginger, a beautiful chestnut mare with a strong spirit. At first, Ginger seemed unfriendly, but after we became friends, she told me her story. Ginger had not always been difficult. When she was young, cruel owners often whipped her and pulled harshly on her reins. They expected perfect obedience, but never showed kindness. Little by little, she became afraid of humans, and sometimes fought back. She told me that many people thought she had a bad temper, but very few understood why. Listening to Ginger made me realize something important. Horses were not born angry. Fear and pain could change even the gentlest heart. Life at Birtwick Park was comfortable. We worked hard every day, but we were never overworked. Our stable was clean, and our grooms cared for us with great attention. One groom named John Manley was especially kind. He always checked our hooves, brushed our coats carefully, and spoke to us like old friends. One cold winter evening, my master asked John to drive him home after visiting a friend. Heavy rain had fallen all day, and the roads were covered with mud. The wind blew strongly, and the night was almost completely dark. As we traveled home, I suddenly noticed that the wooden bridge ahead looked different. Something felt wrong. I stopped walking. John encouraged me to move forward, but I refused. I trusted my instincts. Finally, John climbed down from the carriage to investigate. A few moments later, he discovered that part of the bridge had collapsed because of the flood. If I had continued walking, both the carriage and its passengers might have fallen into the rushing river. John quickly turned the carriage around and found another road home. Everyone praised my good judgment, but I simply felt grateful that we were all safe. Some time later, my happy life changed again. My master's health became poor, and his family decided to leave England for a warmer country. Since they could not take all their horses with them, they had to sell us. Leaving Birtwick Park was one of the saddest moments of my life. I was bought by a gentleman named Earl Shaw. His home was beautiful, and most of the servants treated me well. However, there was one fashion that caused me great pain. At that time, many rich ladies wanted their horses to carry their heads as high as possible. To make this happen, people used a special rein called the bearing rein. It pulled my head upward until I could barely move my neck naturally. The bearing rein looked elegant to people watching from the street, but it hurt terribly. My muscles became sore, and every journey was uncomfortable. I wished humans understood that beauty should never come before kindness. Fortunately, my new master eventually realized how cruel the bearing rein was. He ordered it to be removed, and I felt immediate relief. Not every horse was so lucky. One day I met an old horse who had spent years wearing the tight rein. His neck had become stiff, and he could hardly lower his head even after the rein was removed. Seeing him filled me with sadness. After several years, I was sold once again. This time, I became a carriage horse in the busy streets of London. The city was unlike anything I had ever seen. Thousands of people hurried through crowded roads every day. Wagons, coaches, carts, and riders filled every street. The noise never seemed to end. My new driver was a man named Jerry Barker. Jerry drove a cab to earn money for his family. He worked long hours, but he was one of the kindest people I had ever known. Jerry believed that honesty was more important than money. Sometimes passengers wanted him to work on Sundays, but he refused whenever possible because he believed his horse also deserved a day of rest. Jerry's family treated me like a member of their home. His children often visited the stable, gently stroked my neck, and brought me fresh hay. They never shouted or frightened me. Even after a long day in the busy city, I looked forward to returning home each evening. Working in London was difficult. The streets were crowded, and accidents happened often. Horses slipped on wet stones, heavy wagons blocked the roads, and drivers sometimes became impatient. Many horses around me suffered greatly. Some owners forced sick horses to continue working. Others fed them too little or beat them whenever they slowed down. I often wondered why some people could be so cruel. Horses gave humans their strength every day, We carried them through rain and snow. We worked until we were exhausted. Yet some people still believed we deserved nothing more than pain. One winter, Jerry became seriously ill. He could no longer drive his cab. Without enough money, he was forced to sell me. I did not want to leave him. As I walked away, I looked back one last time. Jerry stood at the gate with his family, waving goodbye. I knew they were as sad as I was. My next owner cared very little about horses. He only cared about making money. Every day I worked longer hours than before. My food became poorer, and my body slowly grew weaker. Then one terrible day, another horse beside me collapsed in the street from exhaustion. Instead of helping him immediately, the owner shouted angrily and tried to force him to stand. Watching that scene filled everyone nearby with sorrow. As time passed, I grew older. My legs became weaker, and I could no longer pull heavy loads as easily as before. Because I was no longer young, I was sold again. This time I worked for a man who treated me harshly. He beat me whenever I became tired. My harness was old and uncomfortable, and my stable was cold and dirty. One rainy afternoon, I slipped while pulling a heavy cart. I injured one of my knees badly. Although I recovered enough to walk again, I could never run as smoothly as before. My owner decided I was no longer useful. Soon I was sold at a horse market. Many buyers examined my teeth, legs, and body as if I were nothing more than an object. Some rejected me because I was too old. Others laughed at my injured knee. For the first time in my life, I truly feared what might happen next. Eventually, I was purchased by a farmer who needed a horse for light work. His family was not cruel, but they were poor. I worked in the fields every day, pulling simple equipment instead of elegant carriages. Although the work was easier, I missed the kindness I had once known. As the years passed, my strength continued to fade. One day, the farmer decided to sell me again because he needed a younger horse. I wondered if my life would ever become peaceful again. At the horse fair, a familiar voice suddenly called out. A man stepped closer and looked carefully at me. It was Joe Green. Many years earlier, Joe had been a young stable boy at Birtwick Park. Back then, John Manley had taught him how to care for horses with patience and kindness. Joe had never forgotten those lessons. Although I was older now, and my beautiful black coat had lost much of its shine, Joe recognized me. He gently touched my forehead and smiled. "Can it really be Black Beauty?" he whispered. I lifted my head and softly touched his shoulder with my nose. Joe immediately decided to buy me. He brought me to his own home where he now managed a peaceful farm. The stable was clean and comfortable. Fresh straw covered the floor, and the fields were wide and green. For the first time in many years, I no longer had to pull heavy carriages through crowded streets. Instead, I spent my days doing only light work when I felt strong enough. On warm afternoons, I could simply stand in the sunshine and enjoy the fresh air. Joe and his family cared for me with great love. They never asked me to do more than I could manage. They understood that I had worked faithfully all my life. Sometimes children came to visit the farm. They gently stroked my neck while Joe told them stories about treating animals with kindness and respect. He explained that horses had feelings just like people. They could feel happiness, fear, loneliness, and pain. They remembered both gentle hands and cruel ones. As I grew older, I spent more and more time resting beneath the trees, listening to birds singing in the fields. The wind felt gentle against my coat, just as it had when I was a young colt. My journey had taken me through happiness and suffering, comfort and hardship, friendship and loneliness. I had belonged to many different owners, but each had taught me something about the human heart. Some believed that animals existed only to serve them. Others understood that every living creature deserved kindness. Looking back on my life, I realized that strength was not measured by how fast a horse could run or how much weight he could carry. True strength could be found in patience, loyalty, and the ability to remain gentle even after experiencing pain. My name was Black Beauty. This is the story of my life. I was only a horse, but through my eyes, perhaps people can better understand that kindness is never wasted. A gentle word, a patient hand, and a caring heart can change a life forever. Whether we are human or animal, we all hope for the same simple things: to be treated with respect, to be understood, and to find a place where we can finally live in peace. Thank you for watching.